It's Christmas morning, and I haven't made a video for a month, but this month I've been thinking about the prophet Daniel. See, Daniel was a person that lived 600 years before Christ. He was taken into captivity by the Babylonian Empire, a real empire on earth with real archaeological evidence of King Nebuchadnezzar's temple, which is in modern day Iraq. And you know, Daniel was a man of God, a man of prayer. And he knew who his identity was in the God of Israel. His forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the God of heaven he would be always praying to, and always just longing to be redeemed. Because remember, he was in captivity. And he was like wondering where on earth he was in this universe. And one of the great things about being a Christian that I find is a great sense of identity. Because, a lot of people, they're going through this world and they're not sure if there is a purpose to all this. They're not sure if there's just a whole bunch of metaverses and we're just floating by fluke circumstances, and when we die, it's over. But what Christianity does offer to everyone, and Daniel, although he wasn't a Christian because Christ hadn't come yet, he's following the God of purpose. And he had a very specific purpose for Daniel. See, Daniel was in captivity, and the king Nebuchadnezzar had a huge dream, a very significant dream, and he wanted the wise men, the magi, the astrologers, the magicians, the learned people to be able to interpret his dream. He wasn't going to tell them his dream. They had to perceive his dream and then give an interpretation. And they were like, "Oh no, nobody could do this." So then the magi were on the chopping block. Daniel hears about this. A man from Judah under captivity who was brought into the king's close to the king, up in the upper echelons with these wise men, because he was known for his ability to speak different languages, and he was just a man of great wisdom. And he'd worked his way into this kind of, because as the king would take over countries, they would take the brightest and the greatest, take all their resources and all their brain power. And Daniel was one of these people, and he's like, "Give me some time. I will be able to interpret this dream." This dream, recorded in Daniel chapter 2, talks about the great future of world empires. He had a dream of a statue with a golden head, a silver chest, a bronze legs, and feet of iron and clay mixed together. But then there was a rock, not carved out of human hands, that came from heaven and destroyed all these kingdoms. Just crushed them all the way down. So Daniel gives the interpretation to this dream. Not only did he give the interpretation, but he had to perceive the dream himself. And he was like, "Oh, king, you are the head of gold, but there's a kingdom coming after you, not as great, of silver. But ultimately, after these 4 kingdoms come down, there is going to be a kingdom that will be established forever, an everlasting kingdom that will crush all the other kingdoms, and he'll set up a kingdom of peace. The anointed one will come." These are the kinds of things that Daniel is saying. People became jealous of Daniel, right? Because the king was like, "Oh, yes, this is great." And of course, he's the head of gold. He loves to hear this. So Daniel gets accused of being, there was jealousy. We know the story. He gets thrown in the lion's den because these other satraps and these other magi, they were trying to trap Daniel out of jealousy, really. Daniel gets out of the lion's den. And what does he do? He continues his prophetic journey. See, these prophecies are very important because when the wise men in the east saw a star, they weren't just like, there's a star, and then they decided to go to Bethlehem to see. No, they had these ancient prophecies about who's coming and why and when, and what timeline should we expect. So these wise men, when the star appeared, over Bethlehem and Jerusalem, they not only had the book of Daniel talking about how many kingdoms there will be on this earth until the anointed one comes, the one that's going to set up a kingdom of peace, but they also had different prophecies like Jeremiah. See, Jeremiah prophesied that the kingdom of Babylon was going to come and take them. This is well before it was taken. But then he also talks about a time of restoration. Jeremiah does. So Daniel's reading this when he's in exile. This time, the Babylonian kingdom was taken over by the Persian kingdom, but he still stayed in the upper echelons of the Magi. And he's like, well, Lord, aren't you going to restore your people back into the promised land? Hasn't this time of captivity come to an end? Didn't Jeremiah prophesy that we would be in prison for, captivity for 70 years? And the angel comes to Daniel chapter 9. And he's like, no, Daniel, it's 70 times 7. It'll be 490 years before the anointed one comes, the Prince of Peace. So when these people, they had this canonical gospel, they know how many world empires there's going to be. They have Daniel's prayer from the angel Gabriel, who decides to come and tell him about, when these people will be restored to their people. And the Persian king Cyrus, he issues a decree. This is found within secular archaeological evidence that reinstates the people back to their homeland, back to their temple, and they rebuilt the temple. And lo and behold, who is born 490 years after? And who are these wise people that had these scriptures? It was those who recognized Daniel's authority, who recognized him as a prophet, who had these ancient Hebrew texts. Talks about where this anointed king is going to be born, in Bethlehem. I think that's found in the prophet Micah. Who his great-grandfather is going to be, this anointed one, King David, which town he was going to be born in. It gives a whole bunch of these different prophecies. 490 years after the captivity into Babylon is when he was going to come. So no wonder that during the first century there was an uproar when of like people were talking about the end is near, the king is coming, and lo and behold, who came but Jesus? And Jesus is his identity. He came to give us an identity. He wants to not only establish his kingdom, but he wants to let us know that there is a purpose to this world. He wants to give us his spirit. He wants to show us which way to go. And he sends his self, his representation himself, God on earth in human form, to show us the way, to give us a plan, to give us a purpose. And the Daniel says, those who are wise will shine like the heavens, like the stars in the heavens forever and ever. Those who are wise, who bring many to righteousness. And that's exactly what Daniel is doing. There is different empires, there's different kingdoms that want to take control of this earth, but we know our identity is in Christ. And he is the rock that isn't carved out of human hands, but he is coming to establish his kingdom once and for all, his kingdom of peace, his kingdom of love, his kingdom of everlasting righteousness. Merry Christmas, everyone.